Hi, I'm Andy. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to make your very own head candle. To follow along, you're going to need access to a 3D printer. You're going to need some supply of wax, and you're going to have a head model of some kind. And I'll show you how to get all of these, so don't worry about it.
For starters, you need to get a 3D model of your head. There's a few ways to do this, ranging from free to $5,000. If you have an iPhone, the easiest way is to buy some head scanning app on the App Store. These use the Face ID camera and generate a head model for you. The free version of this is to download and run the code for a head scanning app yourself. Standard Cyborg is a defunct company which posted their code online when they ran out of money, and Apple even provides an object scanning example project all ready to go. You just have to run this code yourself. The third option is, if you have access to a makerspace, they might have a dedicated handheld 3D scanner you can borrow, and these can provide a pretty high resolution scan. Once you've got your head model, you can make the candle in one of two ways. First, you can print a positive and then encase it in silicone to make a mold. This is best if you're making a bunch of candles. The second option is to make the mold directly using a 3D printer. You'll need to use a bit of Blender for this, and don't be intimidated, it's really quite simple. All you gotta do is load in your head model, generate 2 cubes, move them to either side of the head, and then use the Bool tool modifier to subtract the mesh from those cubes. And boom, you get a mold just like that. Don't forget to cut a hole in the top to pour in the wax. Now the mold is made and we're going to 3D print it. Personally, I love to use resin printers because the resolution is absolutely stunning compared to the old filament printers. But this method should work with either one. If there's any defects keeping the molds from closing properly after they're printed, feel free to sand them off. We want them to close as tightly as possible so no wax leaks out. So on one hand, we have our newly printed candle mold, and the other, we have the candle we're going to use for the wax.
The easiest way to get wax for this project is to steal it from another candle. You even get a free wick out of it. If I were you, I'd find a nice solid candle for this, not one of those cheap ones that's very crumbly. I like to use beeswax because I like the color, it's very solid, and I enjoy the smell of bees.
So we're back and we have the wax that we've collected from our candles. And we also have our original 3D printed mold. I also took the liberty of printing one additional mold here, my other friend.
When I was looking online for instructions on how to make candles, everyone was like double boiler this, double boiler that, and I wasn't about to buy one of these, so I had to come up with something. As it turns out, the next best thing to a double boiler is a glass jar with cardboard at the bottom. Who knew? While we're waiting for the wax to melt, we'll go ahead and prep the molds. The wax loves your mold. It wants to stick on even after it's poured, which can ruin your candle. We're going to make sure that they separate by adding some oil to the inside of the mold. Any kitchen oil will do. Make sure it covers all the surfaces and then pour out the excess. Because the two mold halves don't fit together perfectly, we're going to wrap the whole thing in saran wrap to keep it wax proof, and then add a rubber band to keep the two halves aligned. Okay, now the molds are ready and the wax is done melting. We're almost ready to pour. Get your candle wick ready and prepare your funnel for pouring the wax. If you don't have a funnel, you can easily make one out of foil real quick. You should do this bit fast because the wax gets cold quickly. A bit of overflow is fine since the wax will shrink as it cools. Make sure to put the wax back on the heat. You might need it later. Now is a good time to add the wick. After letting our mold sit for a bit, you may notice some air bubbles forming at the top. This is due to the shrinkage of the wax. You should do another pour to top it off, or else your candle will have a big dent in the head. After you're done with the pour, just leave the mold somewhere so they can cool off. If you're impatient, please resist the urge to put them somewhere cold like the fridge. It leaves all these bubbles on the surface and messes up the candle. Depending on their size, your candle should be ready after about 12 hours. You're going to need a knife or some other really thin thing to jimmy these molds open. Get it into one of the cracks and then work it around. Don't worry about cutting the candle because it's quite soft and it's really fixable if you leave a line. After a bit of jimmying, you should be able to separate the two halves. It may be hard to get the other half off, but you can use the knife knowing that you can repair most of the marks on the candle because it's quite soft. If any of the candles have problems, you can always just put them back into the mold and re-pour it. I fixed the half-headed one like this and it came out pretty okay. If you think you overdo this again, you can clean off the molds by running them under hot water. It melts it and pushes off the wax. And that's all the content I have for now, so see you later.